Good evening, you know. Good evening. Friday evening listening to diversity. No. I don't know if I would have done it, okay, but I'm glad that all of you are doing this, okay. And I really, when Govind from SP Jain reached out to me like 6 weeks ago and kind of spoke that SP Jain is trying to organize a conference around diversity at the workplace and how do you harness that for talent management, I was pleasantly surprised. You know, B schools, at least in India up till now, have focused a lot on ensuring that you teach people commodities, derivatives, you know, marketing strategy, the Porter's four forces and stuff like that. And we've been reasonably successful in doing that, but we've never looked at the world around us, which is so diverse, and how do we kind of tap into that diversity. And I was really surprised that this morning when I was coming to the college with some of the students from here, I casually asked them, what's your diversity ratio in your college of students? Because if you go to any Indian B school, the only diversity you see is the branch of engineering, isn't it? You know, 95% of your students are engineers, and there is a diversity around instrumentation, mechanical, computer science, okay? And you probably see handful of girls, you know, and I'm not even talking about people with disabilities or people of different ethnic origin or of people of different sexual orientation or anything like that. I'm just talking about the male-female diversity. So for a college to kind of really look at diversity and to be able to reach out to lots of you are probably students and some of you who are early career professionals to talk about something which is very close to my heart, I jumped on this idea. You know, I jumped on this idea and I'm here. So, Stacy, thank you. I wanted to kind of speak a bit about unconscious bias, okay? And Stacy's done a full session, so that kind of, you know, I will not talk about unconscious bias, but then I'll talk about conscious bias. I think a gentleman there asked me a question in India, are we still at the stage of conscious bias? I think we are, isn't it? The past 3-4 weeks has been fascinating display of conscious bias by people in powerful positions, isn't it? Okay. It has been so fascinating that we are now known as probably a country full of idiots, honestly speaking. I work for a company which also is prided as the world's largest news agency, and we probably cover news in all parts of the world. And what I hear from journalists is that, you know, the whole world is like, what's happening in India? You know, that's what the question is being asked. And this is conscious bias when it comes to 50% of a population. I think the man in all of us, okay, is not able to take the fact that women are standing up and asking for their rights, okay. Imagine what happens when people with disabilities start asking for their rights. I think the greatest diversity challenge this country will face in the next 10 years is the generational diversity. When 4 generations of people will be in the workplace. You know, there will be the kids, the Facebook generation will get into the workplace, okay? There is the Gen Y already at the workplace, there is Gen X at the workplace, and then there is, you know, the baby boomers, if you were to call them, some of them would still be there in the workplace. That's going to be catastrophic if we continue to have the kind of conscious bias we have towards each generation. How many of us take those kids who are 14, 15 today and continuously on SMS? You know, that day I was reading when the government put a cap on number of SMSs you need to send, students were saying, I send 2,000 SMSs a month. You know, I think I am, you know, the Facebook generation, okay, though I'm Gen X, I think. But I was like, 3,000 SMSs a month? That was unconscious bias, okay? But that's the way they live. So imagine the day when people who have different sexual orientations stand up and start asking for their rights. We'll be scurrying for cover as a nation, okay? So conscious bias is there. So that's my, you know, diversity and inclusion, to what Professor, you know, in his opening speech said, is becoming more and more important. Organizations are looking at, why is this, you know, is this a fad? You know, like there are fads which every era goes through, isn't it? In the last 2-3 years, there has been increased emphasis on the fact that there needs to be a chief diversity officer. You know, 50% of my job involves D&I. Okay, a lot of people who still from the old world ask me, why? Haven't we been successful? We've been successful till now by having a very monochromatic way of looking at life. But then will we be successful in the 21st, 22nd century being monochromatic? Definitely not. It's a wake-up call, and that's why organizations are looking at it. So I'm particularly passionate about this, and I was talking to Keith about what's that one area which I should focus on. I would love to talk about multi-generational diversity. I think that's going to be the most fascinating story this country will ever see, okay? But I'm going to keep my comments around another very important aspect of diversity in this country, which is people with disabilities, okay? So in 2010, World Bank brought out a report in association with World Health Organization. So this is, probably good statistics, Mark Twain said there is statistics and damn lies, isn't it, okay? But then this I'm assuming is good statistics because two global bodies have brought it out and said 10% of the world, 10% of the world of 7 billion people has some form of disability or the other, okay? The Indian census will never say that, okay? I think the latest Indian census said 2% of people in India are disabled because everything in the way our census is done is skewed, okay? And also as a society, we wouldn't want to be proud to say that someone in my family has got a disability because of the social stigma associated with it. But the World Bank said 10% of the of the world has some form of disability or the other. And what does that mean in sheer numbers? You're talking about 700 million people, okay? And then there is the other telling statistics which says 80% of these 700 million people live in underdeveloped to developed countries in the world, okay? So we can argue India shining and everything else, but then we are still at the cusp of underdevelopment to being developed, isn't we are developing. So we probably have 15% of our population with some form of disability or the other. So which kind of makes it out of 120 crores, maybe 15 to 18 crores of crore people in this country have some form of disability or the other. But then, how many do you see on a daily basis as you go by your life? World Bank also used the word that it's the world's largest invisible minority. It's a huge minority, but it's predominantly invisible. Okay, it is invisible. And because it is so invisible, especially in a country like India, I'm sure all of you, in your college, SP Jain, I don't know if there is any student with disabilities. Okay, and I'm sure it's the case with every other premier institution in this country. Okay, though there are, 3% reservation, affirmative action. The moment you walk into a college, you obviously don't have braille facility. You don't have ramps. You don't have teachers who can teach with sign language. So what's the point of having a reservation? This, like many shams we have this in this country, this 3% reservation is another sham, okay? So, because we don't encounter people with disabilities very frequently enough, in our educational institutions we do not, okay? At our workplaces, very rarely, depending on where you work. If you work in one of those modern day multinational organizations, you might encounter one or two, okay? You do not encounter them in public places like your movie halls because none of them are accessible. You don't encounter them in malls and stuff like that. Because you do not encounter them often, what happens is a sense of fear gets built into you. Now, the moment I see someone with a disability, I don't know what to do with it. Am I supposed to kind of lend a helping hand? Am I supposed to stay away? Am I supposed to feel sympathy? Am I supposed to feel empathy? No one knows how to react with it, okay? And if you've never had anyone in your close circle of family or friends with some kind of disability or the other, the problem gets multiplied, And as a result, what we are slowly developing in our Gen Y and the Facebook generation, the millennials as they're called, I call them the Facebook generation, okay, is a skewed view of what perfection is. A perfection is an able-bodied individual, preferably male, from an IIT, and with a green card, okay? So I think that tends to become the perfection personified for a lot of us, isn't it? And that's conscious and unconscious bias playing out beautifully well together, okay? So that's the first problem. The first problem is you do not encounter disability in your day-to-day life, and as a result, there is fear, okay? Now let's flip the story. The definition of disability, again, is very skewed. People would think someone who's either visually impaired, someone who's, like me, who's locomotor challenged, someone who's hearing impaired, someone with autism, intellectual disabilities, are people with disabilities. Great. And those are some of those things which might come, either at childbirth or early in your, as you are growing up. But then we have to realize that any one of us sitting in this room, God forbid, any one of us sitting in this room, tomorrow morning could get disabled. All it needs is a bad rash driving incident, isn't it? Okay? And all of us in this room, in another, God knows, I have to be very careful, there's really young people here, in another 60, 70 years, okay, at the broad range, will encounter some form of disability or the other. Okay? We will become old. When we become old, we will become infirm. And we can't see properly. Okay? We can't hear properly. Then all those fascinating steps you built in your house because you thought that architect thought this was fascinating, you were like, what an idiot. And that's going to happen. And that's going to happen. As she said, India has got this big demographic dividend of a lot of youngsters. We also have the other problem of a lot of people who are living longer now, thanks to the kind of medical advancement we've had. The life expectancy is growing up, but life expectancy is not growing as a fit nation. Life expectancy is growing based on, doctors like our friend sitting there who are prescribing the right medicines. But then, along with it is coming infirm, your body becomes weak. And then there is that huge section of the population which will become disabled in some form or the other. And then the society won't know what to do with them. The society won't have the structures to support them. Okay? And all of us are successful professionals. We'll all make a lot of money in the future. Okay? Hopefully all of us make. Okay? And then we will be rich, disabled people who cannot access the lifestyle needs of ours. So what is also happening is a huge market potential for companies is getting diminished. So we talk about disabled as an alternate pool of talent, but I would like to look at people with disabilities as an alternate pool of consumers. Okay? Like today, I'm sure there are at least 0.01% people like me who've been reasonably successful in spite of our disabilities. I would never go to any restaurant, shopping mall, movie hall, airline, which is not disabled friendly. You don't get my money, period. Okay? And when Govind reached out to me saying that, will you come over? The first thing I told him, even before asking what is this whole deal about, was let me know if your institute is accessible. If it is not accessible, I don't care if you're SP Jain, I'm not coming. Okay? So, if all of us, as we grow older and kind of inherit disabilities, become economically powerful, then there will be this huge societal imbalance where there are people who want to spend the money but do not have access where to spend it. Okay? And then that will become a huge problem for the society. Okay? And then there is the story of the alternate talent pool. All of us in HR like to call, there is a war of talent outside there. There is a war of talent. You never get the right kind of people and stuff like that. But very rarely do we look into this alternate talent pool. There is obviously practical challenges to it because, you cannot probably try and hire a person with disability in all kinds of jobs as you could look at people with able bodies. One, they do not have the qualifications because education in this country, access to inclusive education in this country is abysmal. Abysmal. I was a bright kid at school. I got a first rank in Karnataka in our 10th board examination. I could have walked into any college I wanted. Okay? But then, my choice of the college was dictated in 1995 by the only college in Bangalore which had a lift. Okay? So, was it good or bad? That's not the debate. The story is, this is the kind of real barriers you face. Real barriers you face. And and this is true even today. You can go to any of your top institutes in this country. Yes, there are excuses for accessible stuff, but then you never find anything which is really accessible. And as a result, the right kind of talent never gets into the market. But does it stop us from does it prevent us from really tapping into this talent? No. Lots of organizations have done fabulously well in terms of trying to access this talent in creative ways. And if there are professionals here, more than happy to talk to you about it. There is a back office company in Bangalore, I think it's called Vindhya Informatics. Two very normal entrepreneurs who run a BPO, supporting some really big customers who employ 100% people with disabilities. Okay? my own organization, I think is one of the pioneers in hiring people with disabilities, okay? And we've done it very successfully and integrated people into the organization. So I'm sure there are multiple examples of organizations which have done it, but how have they done it? And this is where I think all of us need to get creative, because access to education and getting ready-made graduates who can walk into your companies is not going to happen for the next 100 years in this country. Let's be very honest about it, okay? It will take one generation to kind of change, okay, for it to really happen. The only other way we can look at is looking at a very robust train and hire model, where we are able to kind of take people with basic education, train them, okay, and then hire them into organizations to do jobs which suit their disabilities. You know, I think that's the way we can take baby steps. And what does it pay off? I know it's a lot of investment for the company. It takes time. You got to modify your offices and stuff like that. You know, I think another fascinating aspect, I have to say this is something which I've been observing recently. Our organizations went from having male-only loose, because we don't like to piss and kiss in the public, isn't it? Okay, so male only loose, and then we started having male and female loose in. I'm sure there are still lots of manufacturing organizations where they're only male only loose. Okay, to some organizations having, you know, wheelchair accessible loose. Okay, and now where the world is going is unisex loose, because we started realizing that Uma Maheshwari, the transgender, is also important. Okay, so you need to have, you know, the unisex loose. Okay, so making these investments for organizations is long term. You know, why should I build a wheelchair accessible loo if I don't have anyone with disability? Okay, what are you trying to do by doing that? By just building a loo or a ramp or putting braille signages, you are making a statement that you're being inclusive. Okay, and lots of organizations are getting onto that bandwagon and journey, and as they do that, the benefits of hiring people with disabilities has been humongous in organizations where they've done. You know, in my own organization, for example, we have around 60, 70 people with disabilities doing variety of functions, okay? Some complex, some not so complex. But then each of the performance of those individuals has been better, if not equal, to their able-bodied colleagues. And then what you also get in return, especially in an industry like ours, the IT and ITES industry, is loyalty to the organization. You know, out of those 70 people we've hired, I think we've lost 2 or 3 people, that's it. And one of them, because he wanted to go for further education, and 2 other people who went for better opportunity. So you end up getting a loyal workforce. And I think that's a big one for a lot of HR managers here, because attrition is a big problem. Okay. So there are benefits. It is a long process, and it takes time for organizations to do it. Lots of organizations don't know where to begin. The best thing to do, if you really want to get onto this journey, is to start working with non-government, non-profit organizations who've kind of understood how this whole thing works. Okay? And once you start engaging with them, you learn what happens. And the intangible payoff out of all this is, you know, if you go to any team which has a person with disabilities, I've seen this in lots of my interactions with organizations, the amount of employee engagement and team bonding is very, very different. Okay, because now people are more sensitive. For example, if a team meeting was always about the leader standing there and ranting for 30 minutes, now has to change if there is a hearing impaired person in the team. You cannot talk for 30 minutes non-stop because the other person is not able to hear. So you need to write more. You need to keep it really crisp. Okay, so there are other payoffs as well when you do that. Okay, the meetings become shorter, you know, which is a big bugbear in organizations, isn't it? Okay, so there are both tangible and intangible benefits of hiring people with disabilities. Coming back to the next point I would like to make is about the whole idea of diversity. You know, I think all the earlier speakers spoke about diversity. For me is a given. You like it or not, there is going to be diversity. I think there are around 150 people in this room. I would be shocked if I were to ask any of you saying that, aren't both of you similar? There's no way in the world, isn't it? You know, all of us are unique. That's what we believe we are. And I'm sure we are unique. So diversity is a given, but what is essential if you really need to make a difference is the inclusion mindset. You know, how do I include people in what I try and do? And that's where conscious bias, I think, prevents a lot of us from doing it. I don't even want to get into unconscious bias. I think there is conscious bias. Every time I'm in an aeroplane and, you know, people who are wheelchair passengers normally disembark last. Okay? and there are people who are walking, and I'm sitting there, people are like, what an idiot. Why is he sitting here? Okay? The plane has landed, why is he not getting off? That's the kind of look people have around you. And when you go to a movie hall, people like stare at you like this, okay? There was a time when me and my wife, I was taking a step like what I was doing now, and I was going, and people were staring at me. So I told them, okay, the show was $300, now you're watching me, that's $100, okay? So, and I'm sure that guy went back home like, shit, what did I do? Sorry, okay? So, that conscious bias is deep-rooted in all of us, and conscious bias not just towards people with disabilities, but people who are different from us in some way, form, or shape, including gender. So, if we have to move towards inclusion, I really look to the generation of today to start breaking those barriers and believing that I, as an individual, will try and include as many people who are different from me in whatever I try and do. And once that journey begins, because I think some of us in our generation, the previous generation, we've become too hard-coded to change now. Okay, it is difficult. How you've lived 50 years of your life, it's very difficult to kind of unturn and try and live differently. But at least the new generation, if they start doing that, I want to include people who are different from what I am, I think we will start taking baby steps to become truly inclusive as a society. And, the last point I would like to make before I conclude, and I would love to take some questions as well, is around the idea of, how can I make a difference, isn't it? How can I, as an individual, make a difference in trying to provide open doors, as Stacey was mentioning, open doors to people who are different from me, especially people with disabilities. I think all of us have amazing amounts of opportunity to do that, especially, as an if you are professionals working in organizations, I'm sure you can make the beginning. If you're a manager of people, you can go up to your HR organization or whoever and say, I want to try and hire one person with disability in my team. And that's all you need to do. You need to start small. Don't try and say that I'm going to make 50% of my organization people with disabilities. You're never going to succeed. Okay? So make a pitch that I'll make one small step, hire one individual, make that whole process successful, and then you will become an evangelist. And that's what's happened in organizations where people have done that. And as students, if you do not see people with disabilities in your college, I think it's time you go and question your professors, saying, why? Why don't we have this? Okay, I'm not talking about SP Jain. I'm generally saying, okay. So, I think as students, if you start questioning it, it is very uncomfortable because imagine tomorrow morning SP Jain gets a visually challenged student, everything changes. Everything in the college will change, honestly speaking, and I can bet that it will change for the better. Okay, people, the way you kind of look at your education will change, or if you were to get someone hearing impaired, it will change. So, if this has to really become a cause, which I love evangelizing, of making people with disabilities come into the mainstream, I think each one of us has a responsibility to start small, okay? I think the first thing we can all do, apart from doing big things like questioning our professors of hiring people with disabilities, is to start looking at people with disabilities differently and not thinking, oh, why can't he just stay at home? If you're trying to climb steps, people, I'm sure, in their mind are thinking, why do you have to go through this struggle? Why can't you just stay at home? Okay? So that conscious or unconscious bias, if you slowly start eliminate, even if 15% of you start doing, I think that'll be great. That will be a huge, huge difference which we can make to a society around us, and then start questioning. So today, if I get to decide which colleges Thomson Reuters will go and hire, okay? And if I find that college is ridiculously inaccessible, we don't go there. Okay? I insist, I put my foot down and say, forget hiring people with disabilities, that college just shows that they're very exclusive in their thinking, and we don't want to hire people with that exclusive mindset. Okay? I can do that because I'm in that position today. But then each of us, if we can start making that kind of challenging situations to people above and around us, I think we will make a big difference. We'll make a big difference. That's all I want to say. I really want all of us to feel inspired that, there is no barrier which any of us cannot surmount. Any of us can surmount whatever barrier we want to say. And also think about the fact that disability is something which does not happen at childbirth. It can happen at any time. In the US, for example, the greatest proportion of people with disabilities are war veterans. And they were not born disabled. and it could happen to you, it could happen to someone whom you love, it could happen to your best friend. So then your life changes forever. And before that happens, I think it's important for all of us to start thinking, how do we look at this differently? Thank you. I would love to, thank you. I would love to take questions if any of you have. Yeah.
I aspire to start a venture that provides assistive technologies for physically challenged. The idea is not to provide the assistive technology as a prop to physically challenged, but a means to empower them so that they become more visible and they stand up for their own rights. But my question is technology an answer to this problem that we are facing? Is technology the only answer? Will it actually solve the problem, or it's about a change of mindset?
Super, very, very good question. And reach out to me if you need. There are lots of companies in India which are doing fabulous work in the area of assistive technology. Would love to connect you with them. I think if you really need to make people with disabilities mainstream, there needs to be 2-3 things which need to happen. The first one, obviously, is access to education. Because if you do not provide people with disabilities access to education, you are completely shutting them off from any kind of economic, social progress they can aspire to have. Okay? So access to education through what? Today, why don't people with disabilities don't go to schools or colleges? Because they cannot go to schools or colleges. Okay? If I were to recount my story of going to school, I had to crawl to go to school. My mother had to carry me to school. But I think the greatest thing they did was to put me in a normal school with normal children. Okay? And very few parents take that kind of risk. Parents also feel, oh, what if my kid can't go to the physical education classes? How will he or she feel? Then they say, don't even go to school. That's what happens in a lot of our psyche of our parents who are also dealing with very different kind of demons when they suddenly discover their child is disabled. Okay? So one is access to education. And for access to education to happen, what needs to happen is accessible infrastructure, accessible physical infrastructure. It doesn't take too much of an effort to convert steps into ramps, honestly speaking. I feel all the architects in our country have probably never gone to good design classes. They probably bunked all of those classes where they were taught good design. Okay? So accessible physical infrastructure is the first one. The second thing is accessible to assistive technologies, especially for people with hearing impairment, for people with visual impairment. The way technology can change life for people with visual impairment is mind-boggling. I recently met this guy who works for Wipro. He's a alumnus of FMS, which is one of those Faculty of Management Studies, one of your top B schools in India. 100% blind, okay? And he heads marketing for Wipro. Okay, and when I met him, the conversation was so normal, and he could figure out that I was on a wheelchair, and he made sure that he kept his eye contact low. Okay, and he was able to do that because of the kind of gizmos and gadgets he had. Okay, I think, for example, iPhone and iPad have kind of changed the paradigm when it comes to people with disabilities. All of us, just go to the settings and see what all is possible, even with an unmodified iPhone, for example. Okay, and I'm sure every other mobile company has that kind of stuff. So accessible technologies will play a huge role. And the third one, obviously, is the realization that the society, the companies need to realize that this is just not also ran kind of people. This is potentially a big market. I was in a conference in Hong Kong in November, and Standard Chartered Bank was making a presentation about how they suddenly realized that, in China and Hong Kong, the number of old people are increasing. And if you go to China, that's what you see, isn't it? You see lots of old people on wheelchairs. Lots and lots of old people on wheelchair. And China has also gone through economic boom. And a lot of these old people have a lot of money. Okay? and they need to access banks. Okay, and because of the one-child norm, a lot of people don't have families to kind of take them to the bank, so they are independent. So Standard Chartered saw this amazing opportunity and ensured all their branches in Hong Kong and mainland China in the big cities became hearing impaired friendly, wheelchair friendly, visually impaired friendly, and their, the revenues they got kind of increased multiple fold. And that was in pure response to the changing demography of the country, and which was an economic driver. I think if these three things can happen, I think you will see more mainstreaming of people with disabilities.
My question is, we are trying to promote inclusiveness, but I see it is a far cry, because whenever we go to any institutions or any railway booking anywhere, the format is still male, female.
Yeah.
There are transgender also.
Yes.
Then they are writing caste. Why to encourage caste? Then you are asking father name. There are single parent child also.
Correct.
So unless and until the basic thing changes, include
True. True. And I think our friend who asked the question about conscious bias, I think these are artifacts of conscious bias, isn't it? The fact that you only believe that there can be a male or a woman, okay, or the fact that you have to display your caste, okay, you should have a husband if you're a lady, okay, or a father, otherwise you don't have an identity, That's how our passport also looks. Passport asks for your father's name or your spouse's name. Otherwise, you don't exist in this country, for God's sake. Okay. So there is conscious bias, and it will take 100 years probably. I'm really hopeful the Facebook generation will change it. Really, really hopeful. Yeah.
So we don't actually have time for questions. Very time constrained. We'll take the questions after the panel discussion. Sure.
When you're actually a society, we don't need to promote the inclusivity of diversity of altogether. As rightly said that child begins at home. As a kid, when I went to Navagraha temple, those who have practiced Hinduism, there is ladies at Navagraha. We have Surya, Chandra, Purva, Ruhu, Surya, 9 girls are together. At the same time, we're worshipping all of them collectively. But yet, all different 9 girls are in different regards why to astrology or whatever. So it's just that the awareness that we should bring in, that it is already there, like Stacey said, the elephant is in the room, but nobody is noticing it. So we need to just understand it and work towards it. That's what I think. It's already there.
Thank you. Thanks for your time. And if any of you, have any questions, I think we are around for some time. Please feel free to walk by and talk.
Hello. Big round of applause for Mr. Jay.
Thank you.